Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. In today's This Type of Challenge video, we'll be seeing how 13 different teams perform as garbage men as they dispose of countless waves of enemies. Genshin's been a little slow lately, so if you're in the market for an upcoming game, I recommend today's sponsor, Dysterra. Humans have colonized space and our home planet Earth has been abandoned, but Earth still has valuable resources to gather. Dysterra is a Rust-type survival game with cutting-edge 4K graphics where you need to survive to the last minute as you explore the devastated Earth with smatterings of science facilities filled with robotic threats. In Dysterra, you will also encounter others with a similar mission, loot their resources or work together to survive. Dysterra allows you to construct epic impenetrable bases through looting and crafting. Global beta testing is happening soon from May 3rd to May 16th, completely free. And the servers will be open 24/7 during the testing period. Just smash that link down below to participate in Dysterra's global beta test, and don't forget to add it to your Steam wishlist. As you can see, Dysterra takes place in a beautiful futuristic setting with advanced science to make construction, looting, and crafting as streamlined as possible, so you can focus on building your perfect base and blowing things up with a myriad of different futuristic weapons. We've got guns, more guns, snipers, epic armors, and even rocket launchers. What's not to love about the crazy high production value of Dysterra? Again, the global beta test is coming soon on May 3rd, so smash that link down below to participate in it and add it to your Steam wishlist. Huge thanks to Dysterra for sponsoring today's video. So this recent Vibro Crystal Research event has brought us an interesting, never-before-seen scenario, and that is endless waves of overworld strength monsters for a single team to destroy. Normally for this type of challenge videos, I beat up on some extremely beefy targets, so we're going to mix things up a bit and instead dispose of countless weak enemies. We've yet to have a situation where characters can compete at destroying as many innocent HILICHURLs as possible. As such, this is a great opportunity to test out the endless wave clearing potentials of various main DPS characters and teams. The stage will be the first part of the first stage of this event. After time is up in the first half and it's the second team's turn, you can simply end the mission there and you'll get the full kill count for the first team. This allows us to measure how many trash mobs they can dumpster. Of course, no vibration resonance crystal thingamajiggers will be selected, as those benefit certain characters much more than others. I did each of these runs 3 times and simply picked the run with the most kills across those 3 runs. Unfortunately, supports were very tricky to choose, so they're kind of all over the place, but you'll see that they kind of converge into a specific group of supports. And in comparison to my other this type of challenge videos and even DPS showdowns, this one has the most room for improvement because I only did each run 3 times. Nonetheless, I thought this was still interesting enough to post since, again, we haven't had anything like this before. Here are all the teams I'll be showcasing. And now for some quick disclaimers. All the times in this video can be improved. I simply did each of these runs 3 times so the sample size is incredibly small. I advise for you not to come to any premature conclusions if you do not sit through these disclaimers and if you do not reach the end of the video. In fact, even after these disclaimers and the entire video, this video is not an accurate representation of these characters' power levels at all levels of investment and play. My characters are almost all at Constellation 6 with their 5/5 weapons. Just because character A is better than character B in this specific scenario does not mean the character A is better than character B. There are most certainly oversights, execution errors, and improvements to be made. Please take everything with a giant grain of salt. Let's start off like we often do with the OG OP Batman LARPer from 2020, the old gold standard Vape Diluc. You'll notice that moving forward for most of these runs, I use Kazuha. Kazuha is able to wipe multiple waves all by himself. Sadly, once it was Xingqiu's or Diluc's portion of the rotation, they both struggle to hit enemies spread out over such a large area. Since these HILICHURLs appear to be as strong as the overworld HILICHURLs, they evaporate to pretty much anything hitting them. Diluc used to be heralded for his massive AoE and cleave, but alas, nowadays his AoE is microscopic in comparison to the much thicker and bigger AoEs of newer characters. Xingqiu, being primarily a single target damage character, also performs horribly here, and Diluc is also often a single target damage character unless the enemies are essentially hugging each other. On top of all that, Xingqiu's cooldowns are very awkward for these rotations, and after a couple of rotations, I quickly lost track of Xingqiu's cooldowns relative to everyone else's. Anyway, the second half of the stage is filled with the Inazuma robots, and while the monster density is certainly much lower and much beefier, killing a lot of these robots will be what separates certain teams from others. After all that Batman LARPing, Diluc secured himself our first kill count of 126 innocent local HILICHURLs and resting robots. Our next contestant is the most explosive child in Teyvat, the Spark Knight Klee. For Klee's team, I went with a mono pyro team with Xiangling as the fourth teammate. You'll notice that a lot of these teams will be using Bennett and Kazuha, as these two happen to be the best support options for most Pyro, Electro, Cryo, and Hydro characters. Anyway, this team is clearly outperforming the previous Diluc team. Xiangling is able to wipe waves with her burst, and the Pyronado picks off HILICHURL's weakened, but not quite killed by Kazuha's elemental skill. Klee is also contributing a lot with her reasonable AoE and her Constellation 4, which turns her into a C4 explosive as she leaves the field, wiping a wave of HILICHURLs. The robots fared no better than the HILICHURLs, and Klee was able to blow up a very good number of them. Anyway, it's clear that this mono pyro Klee Xiangling team is far more capable of clearing out waves of trash spread out awkwardly than the previous Vape Diluc team. In the end, Klee's mono pyro team cleared out 168 monsters, 33% more than our vaping Batman LARPer was able to accomplish. Now we'd be here all day if I showed you the full run for all 13 teams, so we're going to compress some of them with a side-by-side comparison, and in this case, with an Ayato team without Venti on the left, and an Ayato team that abuses the quadratic scaling from Ayato's burst by replacing Kazuha with Venti, and adding Ganyu, who also has a quadratic scaling burst. For the team on the left, which is not focused on its elemental burst, Zhongli is actually pretty good for this, as every time he uses his burst, he basically wipes out a wave. And if by now you haven't noticed, the HILICHURL spawn in 2 to 3 second intervals. So after you murder a wave of HILICHURLs, until that next spawn interval passes, there are no HILICHURLs to murder. You'll see me frequently waiting for HILICHURL waves to spawn. Anyway, on the right side, the quadratic scaling for Ganyu, Ayato, and Venti's bursts are absolutely murdering waves and waves of HILICHURLs. However, positioning Venti's burst is a significant issue, and Ayato's 20-second cooldown burst leads to awkward rotation. Also, due to the delayed 2 to 3 second spawning intervals for the HILICHURLs, Venti, despite seeming to be the best choice for this, really isn't much better than Kazuha, as Kazuha is able to wipe out multiple waves just like Venti can. Ayato's elemental skill infused slashes also make quick work of so many waves of HILICHURLs and does extremely well against the robots. In the end, the Ayato team on the left with Kazuha and Zhongli managed to kill 156 monsters, and the team on the right with Venti and Ganyu managed to kill 159 monsters. A surprisingly small difference despite the large variance in teams. Next, we have the two Electro DPS queens, the Raiden Shogun and Yae Miko. Unfortunately, Overloaded was pretty annoying, but if you can't tell by now, the Bennett-Kazuha combo puts in some serious work, as Bennett boosted Kazuha is able to wipe 2 to 3 waves on his own every single rotation. Interestingly, Yae Miko's kit is actually solid for this. Her turrets clean up stragglers before the spawn intervals, and her burst is staggered, and sometimes is able to wipe out multiple waves that spawn close to each other. Raiden, on the other hand, is a melee character with melee tracking issues, and I was rarely able to land juicy charged attacks where I wanted them to land. Both teams still did very well against the robots, and admittingly, Raiden and Yae were two of my earlier runs during all this, and I got better at this the more runs I did. But alas, I didn't bother revisiting the earlier runs, as this was already a very time-consuming process. They ended up performing fairly similarly to each other, with Raiden securing 144 kills and Yae Miko with 152 kills. I decided to try Yoimiya out in today's This Type of Challenge video, and surprisingly, she didn't disappoint. For trash mobs, Yoimiya's burst is more than enough to take out a wave of these poor HILICHURLs, especially with Kazuha's burst rocking it. And even when her burst is down, Yoimiya's auto attacks manage to kill a few HILICHURLs during their spawn interval. Watching these runs though, I've come to realize that perhaps the most optimal way to do this isn't to focus on Yoimiya, but instead to focus on using Kazuha every time his elemental skill is off cooldown. Doing each run 3 times certainly isn't enough to create optimal runs. Nonetheless, Yoimiya ended up with a surprisingly solid 145 kills. Next, I decided to put 2 of everyone's favorite DPS husbandos together, Xiao and Ito. Xiao seemed like a natural fit for this, as his plunge attacks were one-shotting entire waves of HILICHURLs. Ito seemed decent for this as well, since he was able to kill most of the HILICHURLs during their spawn intervals. For Xiao's team, I actually tried many different team comps for him, and thus did more than 3 runs with Xiao. And funnily, I found that using Kazuha with him to instantly wipe 2 to 3 waves every time Kazuha is on field ended up being the best performance for Xiao's team. The all-Geo team didn't suffer too heavily from not having an Anemo character, surprisingly, as Zhongli's burst and even Albedo's burst were both both capable of deleting an entire wave of HILICHURLs. In the end, they both had similar performances at 149 kills for Xiao and 147 kills for Ito. Kamisato Aika is next, and I decide to deviate away from the standard bended Kazuha core and instead use the standard freeze team for Aika. This is like taking a nuke to a cockroach fight. The excessive overkill on damage from Aika is completely pointless here. Aika's burst and charge attacks lack the proper hitboxes for these spread out HILICHURLs, and Kazuha struggles to one-shot waves without Bennett. This is the first team since Diluc which felt horrible to use for this event. This is admittingly a bad situation for one of the strongest teams in the game, which demonstrates that ultimately everything is situational. Freeze is pointless as the monsters die instantly and aren't dangerous in the slightest, and Ayaka's clunkiness makes this even more challenging. Ayaka's standard freeze team ended up with only 124 kills in 3 attempts. The last 2 runs I wanted to talk about are Child and Ganyu. Both of them are using Bennett, Kazuha, and Xiangling, and as we've seen from earlier, these 3 are incredible for this. This doesn't even include how great Child and Ganyu are at this as well. Child's burst one-shots an entire wave and resets his elemental skill cooldown thanks to his Constellation 6, and his Riptide slashes can wipe out half of a wave nearly instantly. For my Ganyu, because damage wasn't really the main issue, I ran her with tons of crit rate to ensure her charge shots would crit. This allows her to one-shot wave after wave with relatively little effort. And then with some support from her team, she's able to still output big numbers for the slightly beefier monsters. In the end, Child's international team managed to get 158 kills, while Ganyu's meld team managed to get 167 kills. So the winner of today's This Type of Challenge video is Bennett, Kazuha, and Xiangling. That's right, any team with these 3 characters excelled in this event. To prove this point, I decided to swap Kazuha over to a main DPS build with the Jade Cutter, and use Ganyu as a sub DPS support for Kazuha, who is the main wave clearer here. Main DPS Kazuha ended up with 188 kills, way more than any of the other teams. With a bit of practice and all my accrued knowledge, as well as focusing on Kazuha's damage instead of all the other main DPS characters, Kazuha is the clear winner of deleting waves of poor HILICHURLs. Looking at this chart, we can see that 4 out of the top 5 placements were Bennett, Kazuha, and Xiangling, and these 3 alone are able to wipe out over 100 HILICHURLs regardless of who the quote-unquote main DPS on the team was. Of course, Klee, Ganyu, and Child were all able to perform their roles as the main DPS to wipe out some of the stronger targets, so this isn't to take away from their accomplishments here. Interestingly, one of the best teams in general, the standard Aika Freeze team for everything else in this game, did terribly here, and it's no surprise given the parameters and the monsters of this challenge. As we can see, everything in this game ends up being incredibly situational, where teams that you wouldn't think would excel, like Klee's Monopyre team, ended up doing amazingly well here. Now do keep in mind that I only did 3 runs per character, and a few extra for Xiao, so this is not an accurate indication of how these teams would perform given optimal play. And don't forget to smash today's sponsor's link down below, that helps my channel out a ton. Also, I regularly make Genshin Impact videos, ranging from Caesar showcases, DPS showdowns, guide videos, and more. So be sure to smash the subscribe button, as it's the best and easiest way for you to support my work. Also, don't forget to like the video and leave a comment for the YouTube algorithm. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Win to Lose, signing out.
ついていきます。この仕事は排除するべきですね。